What's up, everyone? Don and Ellie here. Thank you again for checking out my channel. If you've been watching my previous episodes, you'll know that I've been going genre by genre, just doing like brief little rundown on several of my favorite films and stuff like that for each of the various different subgenres. Today, we're going to be looking at werewolves, and werewolves are one of my favorite genres. Probably I would say, if I had to pick, like maybe one of my top favorites. And I wouldn't necessarily, they're not really like, I'm not like a huge hardcore horror fan of the genre, but there's a lot of them that I really like. Um, so I figured I might as well do a, small little rundown of those. I figure a lot of people would probably not be aware of what would be the first werewolf film. A lot of people may incorrectly assume that it would be either Universal's The Wolfman, the one with Lon Chaney, or Werewolf of London with Henry Hull. Both of those, being the werewolves. But there's actually an earlier film. This is the earliest one that I know of. I think it's still around, so there may be a couple of others that are a little older that may have been lost to time, but this is the earliest one that I know of that's still around. And that is a Canadian film from 1925 called Wolf Blood. From what I've heard, it's one I haven't seen, but from what I've heard, it's more of a actual wolf rather than werewolf. A wolf actually attacks a group of loggers at this remote logging camp, and their efforts to deal with it. There is a twist at the end that revolves around one of the characters actually discovering that the wolves used to be human. So it kind of falls in with the genre and stuff like that, but it's basically still like the earliest one that is a werewolf film. So just wanted to put that out there, just in case anybody wanted to check it out. 1925, so it's a silent film. You gotta deal with that, but if you're interested, you can go ahead and check it out. Onto the rest of the genre. Probably just going to hit a few of the highlights here. So, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people are familiar with Werewolf of London and The Wolfman. I'm a huge fan of both. They both have their faults. They both have their positives. They both have their faults. I prefer Wolfman over Werewolf of London, but Werewolf of London is severely underrated, and I really want people to give that one a shot. It's a lot better than what you would expect. Yes, one of the faults is the fact that it's essentially a dry run, or like a prep film for Werewolf of London. You still get a lot of the same setups, a lot of similar storylines, because it's basically a similar thing about a guy who gets bitten by a wolf and turns into this killer by moonlight and goes on a rampage and stuff like that. So there's a lot of elements in that one that are found in Wolfman, but I think Wolfman is the one that everybody remembers because, one, it's a better movie. Two, it's actually where a lot of the specific rules come into place. The rules involving transforming by the moon. In Werewolf of London, it's actually just more coincidence that he turns into a werewolf during the full moon. This one here, it specifically mentioned that he turns into a werewolf because of the full moon. So that's something that it's a different differentiation between the two. Sorry. But other than that, you get a lot of Werewolf of London and Wolfman are very similar. They both have a similar take on the Wolfman. Humanoid, a lot of fur around the mouth. Claws, fangs, wolfy eyes, like that kind of a thing. So they're kind of similar in a lot of respects, but Werewolf of London, one of its faults is the fact that if you've seen Wolfman, you've seen a lot of what goes on in Werewolf of London. So it's kind of, it feels very familiar. It feels very much like a prototype, like a dry run kind of a film. like I said, not that it's bad. Like I said, Wolfman is a lot of fun. So a lot of what goes on in that film is brought up in Werewolf of London. So you're still gonna have a lot of fun with that one. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of like the earlier classic werewolf films that are really good. Werewolf of Return of the Vampire actually features a werewolf. It's not that good. Cry of the Werewolf, not even worth mentioning because they don't even use makeup effects in that one. They actually just bring in a large dog and use that as the werewolf. Um, uh, a decent one that it's okay is a film from the mid 50s called The Werewolf. It's about a stranger who arrives in a small town in the middle of the winter and goes on a rampage, and the police are trying to figure out who it is. So it's kind of a fun little whodunit film, but it's kind of obvious who the werewolf is, and it's incredibly cheesy. Like this is like one of the weakest slap job werewolf effects I've seen. So it's got its moments, but it's really like it's kind of like one of those kind of a films. Sorry. Um, Other than that, it's not until you really get to the '60s where you start getting a little bit more of like they start getting a little bit more to deal with. First one that comes to mind, obviously, is the Hammer film, The Curse of the Wolfman, with Oliver Reed playing the character now. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but I've always really liked that one. It's always been one of my underrated Hammer films. I've always been kind of curious as to why they never carried on the saga like they did with Dracula and Frankenstein, and even the Mummy got it in a couple of other sequels. So why this one never got one, I don't know. But it's a lot of fun. It involves hereditary, a curse. The werewolf isn't somebody that's bitten. It's something that's passed down like generationally. It's an hereditary thing. So I've always felt that that was a really interesting twist. Reed is actually competent this time around, rather than some of his drunken antics from a lot of other films that people may recognize him for. So overall, again, Curse of the Wolfman is something to really check out. Another one that again is one that I haven't seen in a long time called House of Terror. It's a Mexican film. It's actually kind of notable because it's the last time that Lon Chaney actually donned the werewolf costume or werewolf makeup, essentially. A lot of people always assume that he was in, because he was in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein, or, where he was also in the makeup for that one. They figure that's the last time he was in it, but it's actually in this film, House of Terror, which is a straight up comedy. The whole film is played for laughs. There's like very little scares at all. But it's kind of a it's another take on Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. It's this worker at a museum who ends up finding that this shipment that is supposed to be part of the museum's next exhibit is Lon Chaney's werewolf, and he comes to life and begins stalking the crew during the night, and the night watchman has to deal with it. If I remember correctly, I believe it's Cantinflas who plays the Night Watchman, but it's been a while and I'm not 100% sure on that. I know it's not Capulina because they would have put his name in the title. I know that for a fact. So I believe it is Cantinflas, but I'm not 100%. So don't quote me on that one. But again, the most important thing about that one is that it's the last time Lon Chaney donned the werewolf makeup. And also another little bit of a trivia: it's also part of the footage that made up a hack job film called Face of the Screaming Werewolf. It was combined. The footage from this film was actually combined with another Mexican horror film. The name escapes me, but I remember reading about this specifically. I mean, I haven't seen Face of the Screaming Werewolf, so I don't know for sure. But I remember reading that House of Terror and this one other one other Mexican horror film were cobbled together, re-edited, and recut into one original feature, and they were like redubbed so that way the storylines fit. Um, like I said, I haven't seen it, so I don't know for sure, like even what the other film is. But I remember House of Terror is the werewolf footage for that. But the most important thing in the 1960s to mention is Paul Naschy. Paul Naschy is one of my all-time favorite actors. Probably like even in my top five. Even I'm a huge fan of his work. If you haven't seen any of his films, the closest I could describe it would be gothic horror in color with more sleaze. So in the night, the first film, which I should mention this because it's a funny story. The first film in Spain, because he's from Spain, the first film was called La Marca del Hombre Lobo, which translates roughly easily to The Mark of the Wolfman. But when it came to America, the film is known under the title Frankenstein's Bloody Terror. Now, the reason for that is because in the near 1970-71, I don't remember, but a film producer by the name of Sam Sherman made a deal with a run of drive-in theaters to show a Dracula picture, not Dracula, Frankenstein. Frankenstein, that's what it is. He had made a deal with a bunch of drive-in theaters to show a Frankenstein picture, which had actually intended to be Al Adamson's film Dracula versus Frankenstein, ironically a film featuring Lon Chaney Jr., sorry. Lon Chaney Jr. was set to star in the film. He's not the werewolf. Obviously it's Dracula versus Frankenstein, so, no werewolf. But that was the film that the original package was sold under. It was intended that this was going to be the film that would fit to fit the bill. But when Adamson was sued by the screenwriter for failing to deliver profits, the film was held up under the court system, so they couldn't distribute it. So Sherman, now in a bind, decided to turn to an international market to try to figure out how to, pay off this package that he found, and stumbled across La Marca del Hombre Lobo. He liked the film, but he didn't have anything in Frankenstein to deal with. So he came up with the idea of, well, I'll just, I'll take this one and I'll just do this weird little prologue where he ends up and he combines the Frankenstein family with the Wolfstein family. So he says, the Frankenstein family was brought underneath this horrible curse, and they've now become werewolves. And they are henceforth not to be known as Frankenstein, but Wolfstein. Though he never bothered to change the rest of the dub because the family is not called Wolfstein in the film. The family is actually called the Daninsky. The character in the film is, the character Paul Naschy plays is Waldemar Daninsky. So why he never bothered to change that, I don't know. But, Frankenstein's Bloody Terror, again, that's, Mark of the Wolfman. It concerns a man who discovers that he's part of an ancestral curse dating back centuries to his ancestors. And he ends up coming under a lycanthropy curse. So he ends up seeking treatment from this doctor and his wife, who supposedly have intimate knowledge of the situation, only to discover that they're predatory vampires looking to use him for their own will and set him loose on the countryside looking for victims or whatever. It's a lot of fun. I really recommend it. It's a fun film to get into. It's a little bit more gothic horror than what you would expect from a 60s film. It really, really plays like a 40s or 50s film with a lot more violence involved. And that is, it's an aspect that carries on through the rest of the films. Naschy is actually, the series involving Naschy actually spans either 13 or 14 films. Depending on how you classify one of the later entries, because one of the well, it's actually the follow-up, a film called Night of Terror. Supposedly, according to Nashi, the film was completed. It was a film that was shot. It was completed. The director that he claims, excuse me, sorry, the director that he claims to have directed the film is a person that died shortly around the time that Nashi gives dates, claiming that the film was completed. According to him, the director died while in the editing process. He's never been able to recover the footage that was shot. So it's a lost film because nobody's been able to find this canister. However, the controversy is none of the other actors that Nashi claimed to have worked on the film with him. None of them None of them can remember actually shooting the film. So it's kind of a weird thing. The director that Nashi claims to have worked, like I said, I can discuss this later on, but the director Nashi claims to have been the one that shot the film died shortly after the date, died for real, shortly after the dates that Nashi said filming was completed. The canisters are missing. He was never able to find it when he was alive, and the cast that he claims to have collaborated on him with the project, they're all unaware or unfamiliar with the project itself. So again, it's one of those I can discuss more later on. But like I said, there's like 13 or 14 films, depending on how you want to call it. Some of the other titles include Werewolf Shadow, Dr. Jekyll versus the Wolfman, Curse of the Devil, the Werewolf versus the Yeti, Beast with the Magic Sword, Night of the Wolfman, Howl of the Devil. There's a lot. That's just a couple of them. There's a lot more in there, and all of them are really worthwhile. They're a lot of fun. Some of them go a lot crazier with the violence and the sleaze. They're still gothic horror though, so it's a lot more older. They're a lot more old school feeling than a lot of the similar films that were coming out at that time period. So if you're into that, go ahead and give those films a watch. I really recommend I really recommend them. From there into like that takes care of the 60s and 70s. In the 80s, this one is obvious: Howling versus American Werewolf in London. I'm not going to go into that here. I'll actually debate that in a separate video, but I go Howling just slightly, and I'll explain why then. However, I think that what would actually be kind of fun is even with Howling's franchise versus the American Werewolf in Paris film, which one actually has a better follow-up? That one is actually going to be kind of fun. I think that would be kind of cool to discuss and debate. A couple of other films worth mentioning. Bad Moon from the 90s, highly underrated. I really like that one. Dog Soldiers, which would probably be, I would say, my all-time favorite werewolf film. I love that movie. That movie's a lot of fun. And probably I would say the last one would be Ginger Snaps. It's pretty underrated. I like a lot of what it does. It's one of the, there's a lot more going on in there than just a werewolf film, but the werewolf stuff is really well handled and comes off quite well. So I'm a huge fan of that one as well. So, also another one worth mentioning, Late Phases, which is a lot of fun and has a lot going on. Let's see if there's any other werewolf films worth mentioning. Not necessarily. I can mention a couple of others. Not necessarily ones that would be like big. Just like ones that would be like a lot of fun. Stuff like Silver Bullet. Not like I would consider it like one of the all-time best werewolf films, but it's a watchable film that's got a lot going on for it. Howl, another British werewolf film. That one is interesting. It's kind of fun. And there was one more that it wasn't a bad film, but it was one that I kind of enjoyed. Oh god, my memory's blanking. I'll mention it later probably, but yeah, I guess I'll leave it there for now. But if you want to check any of these films out, go ahead and do so. Most of these are reviewed on my site. You can check it down below. I've got a link in the description below. But you can also you can find them on dawnshorrorworld.blogspot.com, where I review tons of films, a lot of interviews, articles, and other sorts of features. But yeah, join me next time for another video, and see you guys then.